We are back in the black hole of real estate. And I got a question the other day about what do I do when I need to sell my home sooner than I thought I would ever want to or need to sell it. This is your host, Ron Weiss-Sikarski, for the black hole of real estate. And if you've bought a home in the last year or maybe 2 years, you could be in a situation that was unplanned and perhaps uncomfortable. And here's what I mean. Let's suppose that you had a low down payment, took advantage of FHA or even VA. Maybe you just did a 5% down payment on your property. But maybe you've got some money back in closing costs or concessions. And now you've paid down a little bit of your mortgage, but you've only owned the property for about a year. And you're realizing that the price that you paid last year might be the price that you can get on a good day this year. And let's give you a real example. Let's just suppose that you paid $400 for the property. Now, let's make up a number, $389. And now you're looking to sell it this year. Well, we can price it certainly wherever you want, or you could. But let's say you started at $400. And right now, everything is telling you the property that you paid $389 for last year might be a good price this year. So pricing it a little higher is going to put you in a situation that after some negotiation, maybe you end up at the same exact price. Most likely you've got commission involved. There's absolutely some closing costs and title insurance and other things that come along the way of unnatural closing. And as you start to subtract from there, you could be in a situation where after paying off the mortgage balance, there's very little money left, or maybe no money left. In an extreme case, and we're seeing this, if you're selling within a year or two of a purchase, in order to sell your property, you may actually need to bring some money to the closing table. Now, in my career, and I've done a lot of short sales, I've seen people bring as much as $120,000 to the table. I was surprised and shocked. But I remember to this day, the gentleman said he's lived his life a certain way, and he was not going to short sale or foreclose on his property. He legitimately brought $129,000 to the closing table. This is back around the 2010 time. Things were rough and things were different. And it's not that extreme right now, but I could absolutely make a case that if you had a $400,000 property, and let's just pull a number out of a hat between closing costs and commissions, $25,000, $30,000, you're going to have $370 out of the whole full $400. If you got full price, there's $370 left over. And if you paid $390 for it and put 5% down, you're about breaking even. And if they negotiate down to the $390 that you paid, you might be bringing $5,000 or $10,000 to the table in that scenario. And I'm not saying this is where you are going to be, but there's some situations, and this is every market, where we're going to pay attention to this. And what erodes into that? If you got 5% back, 6%, I don't know, in closing costs, assistance when you bought the house, maybe that $390 you paid, maybe it was a $380,000 house, but this happens. We'd like to give you $380 for it, but we need $10,000 in closing cost assistance. Why don't we make the deal $390? So we've artificially inflated the purchase price to accommodate that need, but maybe it was always a $380,000 property. And if it sells at $380 right now, this is the scenario that we're seeing right now. There's absolutely a way that you can get closing cost assistance, and it's welcome and it's legal, and there's nothing wrong with it. The house, as long as it appraises, it works for lenders. When buyers are walking into a property in this situation, their vision is that they're going to own the home long enough to outpace that extra money that they financed in the home, knowing that the market value was just a little bit less. Now, a job transfer can come up, a change of circumstance in your marital status could absolutely take place. People are moving for schools and jobs and opportunities, health concerns. Every year, somebody thought that they were buying their forever home the following year is forced to sell it for their own reasons. And when they're in this situation, there is this negative equity situation. And it's a little confusing. If you bought a home at $390 and you feel that it's worth $400, you're entitled to that. But the illusion becomes scary when it's reality of, man, I owe $385 in this house. However you got there, if you did 100% financing and you owe $385 and it's going to sell at $380, you're already negative and you haven't paid any commission or any closing costs. And the numbers can get scary really fast. And there's not necessarily a loan that you can get afterwards because you've got to pay off the mortgage. There's not really a way to sell the property without paying off the mortgage unless you've got an FHA mortgage that's assumable. And even then, there's some terms and conditions that goes along with that. And I consult a professional if you're attempting to do an assumable assumption of your mortgage, on an FHA. So I'd be super careful with that and get some help if you need it. But when we are thinking of selling, and it's a big detraction to be able to sell, because you think that, we'll sell the house, we're going to make some money, it's worth more than I paid for it, I'm going to take that money and use it for a down payment on the next house, and all of a sudden, it's like, wow, maybe there's less of a down payment or no down payment available from proceeds. That could take a homeowner and cause them to really, really have to work hard to buy another house. Loans against 401ks might happen. That counts against your qualifying income. That could be difficult. If you're going from a homeowner to a renter, there's no stigma to me on that. There's been plenty of times in my life where I personally have rented as a choice that made more sense than owning. These days, I do have a home, but I think you need a home more than you need to know if you own it or rent it. And some people are forced into a situation to go from home ownership to home rentership. The finances can be tricky. So if you're in a situation where you've got solid equity and you have no mortgage or a small mortgage or none of these concerns, maybe today's show isn't for you. But I got to believe that someone who's bought in the last year or two that might be in a tougher situation than they might have imagined. For those that bought 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was rapid appreciation. And maybe a home was bought for $250 is now worth $350 or $400. But if there was a refinance in there because the rates were low and you moved, the mortgage balance up, that could also place you in this conundrum where, I paid $250 for it, and emotionally, I paid $250 for it, and it's worth $400 today. But if you got a new mortgage at $350 or $360, the equity, you've used it. You've pre-spent some of that money. I am not one for rude awakenings to people. So, I mean, who really likes a surprise when it's negative? We like positive surprises, like surprise birthday parties and random acts of kindness and gifts. Not too many people are fond of finding out they've got less equity or less money at closing than they were planning on, because it's an interruption to future plans. And I want to take some time today to go through the steps that we can take to make sure that if we're selling within the first year or two, what it looks like, and I think we've detailed that. If you're buying right now, I would just ask you, do you plan on being in the home for a long time? And you could define long, but if you're going with a VA mortgage with no down payment, if you're using an FHA with a 3.5% down payment, and you're receiving some money back to help with the closing costs, I would want you to know today, as a good friend, that if you are forced to sell or have to sell or choose to sell in a year, there may not be a lot of money left over at the closing. You may, and I hope it's not the case, be in a situation where you got to write a check to finish the sale on the house to no longer own it. And I absolutely want you to hear that if you feel you're in an area where prices may not appreciate as much as others, or the market is not necessarily going up, that you have a situation that hopefully never happens, but you could be in a situation where you're underwater to the point that you may not get foreclosed on, but the only way to sell might be a short sale. Not a popular route to go. It doesn't impact your credit. The good news is, if you're hearing this right now, you've got some information that will help you formulate your decision if you're buying today, how you would handle that, and what the escape hatch looks like if you got to sell it in advance of when you thought you might have to. But if you're in the current situation where you're forced to sell a property, maybe the hurricane came through and there was damage, maybe there's a life change or circumstance or a job transfer or marital status transfer that would cause you to sell it, Now you know a couple of stumbling blocks that might be in your way. If you got questions about this, these are definitely the things I want you to drop a message on or get a hold of us in such a way that we can respond to it in a future podcast. Or, if you want us to answer directly, you know how to do that. Now definitely click, definitely subscribe, and definitely let us know how we're doing here. This is Ron Wysokarski for the Black Hole of Real Estate.